Thank you for tuning in, Prophet Gayu. In this video's topic, I am going to talk about something a little different. Puerto Rico's struggle for self-determination.
Couldn't take it no more, so I left the matrix.
And my money just tripled. I had a good time and it cost me a little. So I found peace, tranquility, faith in my abilities.
I couldn't fake no more, so I left the matrix.
Now, I preface this by talking about Puerto Rico, but this in reality can be any U.S. territory or maybe even any territory / colony that exists in this world at this point. Puerto Rico's struggle for self-determination. What is that? Well, I think it's important to know that if you already didn't know, that the people of Puerto Rico are actually United States citizens. They are U.S. citizens, have U.S. passports. They are taxed, join the military, and if they have to, they will be forced to enter the draft. The same stores, companies, basically that you'll find in the other 50 states and territories, you'll find in Puerto Rico. There are military bases there. So Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory that in many ways is very similar to a state. However, it's not a state. It's a U.S. territory. Now, some of you may ask, well, what is U.S. territory? What is that? How does that work? Well, I will get into that. But first, let me talk more about Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico is the most populous U.S. territory. It has maybe about 3.5 million people. In the recent years, Puerto Rico has been losing much of its population. And that was accelerated by the Hurricane Maria and the damage that was caused after that, and also the economic hardship, the corruption. A lot of folks are fed up with Puerto Rico and they are leaving. They're leaving for better jobs, for higher pay, and for more opportunities. So what you find right now in Puerto Rico is a lot of places, a lot of towns are vacant. If you drive across Puerto Rico, you'll see that, once more or less bustling towns are like ghost towns and people are just leaving. So an island that just fairly recent, maybe 10 years ago, had over 4 million people, now has closer to 3 million people. So just keep that in mind. What makes Puerto Rico different from the other states? Well, the people who live in Puerto Rico that claim Puerto Rico as their residence, they cannot vote in presidential elections. In addition, they do not have voting representation in Congress. All the 50 states that will have a few people in the House of Representatives that represent their respective districts within their state, and they also have 2 senators. Well, Puerto Rico doesn't have any of that. They have a non-voting resident commissioner that basically whispers in the ears of other voting congressmen and congresswomen, but that's all they can do. They can propose bills, but they don't have the same respect because they don't have any voting rights. So they're not going to be whipped into doing something because they don't have any skin in the game. In addition, you'll have that Puerto Rico does not pay state income tax. But what you'll find is a lot of people tend to use that as a reason to legitimize colonialism in Puerto Rico and legitimize abuse or or second class citizenship or the denial of basic citizenship rights, which is to vote in a democracy, is to vote, which is pretty interesting when you look at the United States. The United States is a proponent of democracy, especially after World War II, go across the world, making sure that people's rights are respected and human rights and democracy, etc. But at the same time, Puerto Rico doesn't have those same rights. And there has not been any real movement to ensure that they do, even in 2022. Now we understand, not that it's excusable, but we understand that in the first half or for the most of the 20th century, a lot of folks were marginalized. A lot of folks didn't have basic human rights or basic citizenship rights. I mean, black folks included. And so with that case, you would think that, okay, now you are creating the Civil Rights Act. You would think that all U.S. citizens will be able to benefit from that, but in actuality, the voting portion, it was still taken away from a lot of marginalized people, to include folks who live in the territories, such as Puerto Rico, which had a very large population. Hell, their population is larger than probably most, if not half, the states in the U.S. So it's really significant in the sense that a lot of people are being denied the ability to vote. On top of that, you had the Jones Act. Now, the Jones Act is essentially that goods cannot go from a foreign port to Puerto Rico. They have to go to a U.S. port before it can actually go to Puerto Rico. So what does that do? So if you are bringing goods from Nigeria and Nigeria wants to bring those goods to Puerto Rico, they cannot. They actually have to go to another U.S. port, which is probably one of the most popular ports, which would be amongst the 48 states. It would have to go there first, Miami, for example, and then from Miami, it'd have to go to Puerto Rico. So with that said, the cost will be much higher in Puerto Rico. So with that said is you would think that over all these different things stacked up against Puerto Rico, there should be some sort of, I guess, outcry or push for some sort of full citizenship rights for Puerto Ricans living in Puerto Rico, which would make sense, right? But that's not the case. So what do you have? You have the United Nations. Now, the United Nations has always been some sort of since its formation back in the 1940s. There's always been a beacon for democracy across the world, right? As soon as they were formed, they had this huge push against decolonization, which was the reason why much of those colonies in Asia and Africa and the Caribbean gained their independence for the most part. Now, you still have some colonies out there that were turned into territories, verbiage, territories, Commonwealth, but essentially they're still colonies based on their relationship with that colonial power. And what you found in the Pacific, there's French Caledonia, and there was East Timor until recently, a couple of decades ago, again, its independence. And now you have the U.S. territories where you still have Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, the Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, so American Samoa. So you still have varying degrees of colonies within these of colonialism within these U.S. territories. And we can talk about American Samoa, where they're not even born with U.S. citizenship. How your U.S. territory, you're not even born with U.S. citizenship. What is that about? But that's another story, and I will make another video on that. But let's just stick with Puerto Rico in this sense. So, what's being done on with the UN? Well, the UN has essentially viewed Puerto Rico as an internal issue within the United States. So, hey, the United States, that's an internal issue. You deal with that, and we're not going to do anything about that. But you do have some nations within the United Nations that are continuously pushing for self-determination in Puerto Rico. And there's a committee, a decolonization committee within the UN. And every year for the last 40 years or so, they have voted to decolonize Puerto Rico. But when it gets to the General Assembly of the United Nations, it gets voted down. People ignore it. And I believe the reason is the United States is such a strong, influential country. If they don't want you to vote for something, most countries will not. And that's it. So let's look at the United States. What is the United States government doing about this? Well, I can tell you this. And there has been about 5 or 6 referendums in Puerto Rico, essentially voting for statehood. And the most recent ones, 2012, 2017, and 2020, which in all of those, there was a overwhelmingly approval vote for statehood. But Congress sees that, and basically the territories are under the power of the U.S. Congress. The U.S. Congress makes all the decisions for the U.S. territories. The U.S. territories cannot trade with foreign countries. They cannot vote within Congress for their own best interest because they don't have a vote. The best they can do is use their resident commissioner within the House to whisper in someone else's ear, but that person is not dealing with the issues of that U.S. territory. That person is dealing with the issues of their district. So that's why, in most cases, nothing really happens. But when people do listen, things can happen. And I'm speaking about this because in just last week, the House of Representatives, for the first time, voted for the Puerto Rican Status Act.
The gentlewoman from Puerto Rico is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, today is a truly historic day for Puerto Rico. Ironically, it is also a perfect example of the island colonial's reality. I am Puerto Rico's only voice in Congress. I represent 3.2 million American citizens living back home, more constituents than anyone in this chamber, and yet, while we consider a bill I helped write, a bill that will directly impact the life of every citizen I represent, I still must rely and depend on everybody here because I cannot vote on the floor. This is the best example of why this bill is so important for Puerto Rico. Today, Congress takes a step towards finally assuming its responsibility under Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of our Constitution to provide the people of Puerto Rico with an opportunity, a federally binding choice to democratically decide our future among 3 non-territorial, constitutionally viable options: statehood, independence, and independence in association with the United States. And for the first time in history, we are considering legislation that will authorize a self-executing plebiscite on the island. With the adoption of this bill, this chamber is also recognizing and making clear that Puerto Rico's century-old territorial status is the problem and cannot be part of the solution. The territorial condition constrains the island's ability to prosper. and has relegated the island into an indefinite second-class status when compared to the 50 states. And this is the main reason behind social, economic, and fiscal challenges we have faced, forcing a mass exodus of millions of Puerto Ricans to the mainland in search for that equality. Congress has perpetuated by its inaction this dysfunctional political economic condition, one that at its core is, as President Ronald Reagan once characterized it, historically unnatural. Because we are a territory, the people of Puerto Rico lack full voting representation in the House and in the Senate, and cannot vote for the president who sends our sons and daughters to the war. Because we are a territory, the federal government can, and often does, treat us unequally under federal laws and programs. Because we are a territory, we are treated as second-class citizens. And because we are a territory, I'm here today discussing a bill related to one of our most critical issues, and yet I cannot vote on this bill. And this is the reason this discussion is so important. I support statehood for the island, and our people have voted not once, not twice, 3 times already supporting statehood. In response, I introduced H.R. 1522, which, following the most recent presidents of Alaska and Hawaii, will have established a process to admit the island as a state of the Union in a simple yes or no vote. However, given the political realities in this Congress, and in the interest of advancing the status issue, I led negotiations on this bill before us. This bill will make an offer to the people of Puerto Rico to choose. I prefer statehood, but this bill would allow the people to choose between statehood or independence in association with the United States, and it spell out the consequences of each option. Of course, this bill is not perfect, but at least it will advance the issue. Today, I remember late Congressman Don Young of Alaska, who understood better than anyone else the inequities that comes with being a territory and always championed statehood for Puerto Rico. Madam Speaker, never a U.S. territory had to wait longer than Puerto Rico to become an independent nation or to become a state. And we have voted 3 times for that. We have more than earned the right to do so. So today, as the sole representative of the people of the island, I urge my colleagues to vote for this bill, H.R. 8393, and allow us to finally put an end to our shameful territorial status. With that, I yield back.
Which is basically, if this is approved, it is mandated, it is binded by the U.S. Congress that the Congress has to act to provide 3 pathways for the status of Puerto Rico, which is statehood, independence, or free sovereignty with free association. Now, what is sovereignty with free association? That is essentially what the Marshall Islands, Palau, and Micronesia has with the United States. So they are independent countries, but they have free association with the United States. Meaning, though they have their own although they have their own citizenship, their own passports, they can actually travel to the United States as residents and join the military and get jobs in the U.S. as if they were a permanent resident. And also, the United States does all the trade and does all the U.S. protected by the U.S. military and all that for those countries. So that's why they call it sovereignty with free association. So those are 3 pathways under this Puerto Rican Status Act that was approved by the House. It was the first time that such a bill was brought to the floor for a vote. Almost all the Democrats voted for it, and only 16 Republicans voted for it. And you would think, well, obviously this is a good bill, right? It forces Puerto Rico out of that colonial status and into one of these 3 pathways. Yeah, it's a good deal, but here's the thing. This is why a lot of people do not want Puerto Rico to become a state, or they prefer Puerto Rico to maintain its colonial status, and I will explain that. First, many believe that if Puerto Rico were to become a state, that would be 2 Democratic senators, and that will be 4 or 5 Democratic congressmen. So that will give more an advantage to the Democratic Party, right? That's the thinking. And that's the thinking because Puerto Ricans that live on the mainland overwhelmingly vote Democrat, though that may not be the case in Puerto Rico, but that's the thinking. In addition, as long as Puerto Rico maintains its colonial status, it's under the control of the U.S. Congress, and for such a big island with so many people, that gives them the ability to maintain that control, maintain that colonial control. And a lot of people don't want to get rid of that because that control is a lot of power to hold while denying certain rights to people who live in Puerto Rico. So with that said, is people have their motives for not wanting Puerto Rico to become a state, in addition to Puerto Rico not becoming independent. So if they became independent, that U.S. Congress would lose that control. So what happens now? Well, it was approved, but this is 2022. And Congress, this happened maybe a few days before Congress went to recess. But it's not really recess because this Congress ends. Now, when Congress returns in January, there is a new Congress. There's a new Senate and there is a new House. Well, that new Senate might not even pick up that and vote on that bill. So just because the old House of 2022 approved this, the new House that's coming in 2023 may not want that to be pushed forward, or that Senate may not even want to vote on it. Because now the Senate is still going to be maintained control by the Democrats, but those Democratic senators are not as interested in the plight of full citizenship rights for Puerto Ricans as the old House is. And the new House coming in, they are going to be under the control of the Republican Party, which, as I just mentioned, overwhelmingly voted against the Puerto Rico Statics Act, which forced Congress to mandate 3 pathways, which is, like I said, statehood, independence, or sovereignty with free association. I touched on quite a few things about this issue with Puerto Rico and why there will probably not be a resolution anytime soon, but likely to be sooner than later now, just simply because the House approving the Puerto Rico Statics Act, which is the first time such a thing has been approved by Congress, because for the most part, the Congress and U.S. politicians do not care about making sure that all U.S. citizens, have the ability to vote and have voting representation in Congress. So that's all I got for the Puerto Rico struggle for self-determination. And I hope that some of you learned something new about Puerto Rico and about U.S. politics and how all this works. If you have any questions, please write me in the comment section. I'll get back to you. If you have any comments, let me know. If you have any suggestions, let me know. If you feel that I was wrong about something, let me know. And give this video a like, share with your family and friends, and I'll be hearing from you soon. Peace.
What up, my people? Hola, mi gente. Gracias por tu apoyo. Da me gusta, sigue mi canal y comparte con toda tu familia. Thank you for supporting my channel. Please give it a like and subscribe and share with all your family if you enjoy my content. Peace.